Okay. I'd like to call to order. The work session is 15th of October. Yes, we are all here. So there is only one item on the agenda tonight. And again, council, with tongue in cheek, I'd like to remind you to refrain from asking questions, but I know sometimes it's necessary, and this might be one of those cases. So, all right, so we'll receive an update on the draft land use assumptions and infrastructure improvement plan that is set to be voted on October 22nd. And we have before us Lori Wiggenroth, our finance manager. Lori?
Hey there. I'm just going to run through a very quick presentation and then leave it open for questions and comments. Okay. So just a couple of things I wanted to tell you about, a couple of infrastructure changes that I'll go over in a little bit more, but one of them was the last time we met with you, we had talked about adding an odor control element to the Rainbow Valley Water Treatment Plant, and we had talked about that and considered that in the last update. So we have added that in, and it is now reflected in both the infrastructure and the fees. The other thing, I'll talk a little bit more about some additional analysis related to the traffic study, and then I'll go through some fee comparisons and then go from there.
Thank you.
So in terms of the street south, you'll recall at the last session, we had just received the traffic study that was done to look at the bridge and the street situation in the southern portion of the plan. And we had to react fairly quickly to that, didn't have a chance to really dig into it. Staff has continued to work with the consultant and with Newland to look more closely at that study. And we have found that there's a need to have the flexibility to do the bridge and the intersection improvements in the coming 10 years. And there was also some potential play with maximizing the capacity or using the Cotton Lane Bridge more. So in order to allow the flexibility for the city to be able to move forward with those two projects in a timely manner in the coming 10 years, we did some additional adjustments to the streets portion of the program. We have extended the time over which the Estrella Bridge would be expected to be consumed by growth use under the assumption that some traffic may switch to Cotton Lane. And we did add a small amount of financing costs, and then we added back the intersection at Estrella and Cotton. We did that without changing the fee. So the fee did not change. We just reprogrammed the timing of the pieces of the infrastructure and changed the life of that bridge. Any questions about that particular item?
I think we're all right.
All right.
I think you said the magic words.
Great. So now I just wanted to walk through the fees one more time with you that result. Otherwise, the plan is the same as the last time we spoke. So the fees for the north area, this is the residential chart, have not changed from the last time we reviewed this. And then here are the fees from the south. I've just highlighted that under the streets, we've changed the infrastructure with no change in the underlying fee. And then just highlighting that the dollar impact of adding that odor control was $210 on the residential fee. And then our non-residential examples, the same particular items we're looking at. Again, the north are the same, and the south have been adjusted relative to the Rainbow Valley odor control. The actual impact on those fees from the last time you saw it is somewhere from $1,000 to $2,000. We had been asked to provide a comparison to other cities' industrial impact fees. So what you have here is a chart that I'll kind of walk through a little bit. The first three columns are Goodyear's current impact fees for our industrial example. You'll notice that we've added Goodyear PV 303 That's one of the areas where we compete with on industrial, so we've identified that. Essentially, it does not include the water fee because a portion of that area is not in our water service area. So then the next 3 bars, so the 4th, 5th, and 6th bars that have a footnote of a 1 on them, those would be the fees that would be resulting as a result of the plan that we've presented to you. And then everybody else's fees are based on their current fees. And these are our normal benchmark city fees, and then specifically Tolleson and El Mirage, which do not have impact fees, were added at the request of the industrial representatives as cities that they feel we compete with. And then the lines that are drawn across are at the PV 303 fee and the north fee that would be the result of this study. Because those essentially were not really competing for industrial in the south, so we wanted the lines to focus on how our proposed fees compare to future fees. And with that, it's open for your questions, your discussion.
Thank you. Anybody on this side? All right, go to this side. Bill?
So one of the things I had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks, and we met with Lori and Doug last week, is the day before that meeting, I also had an opportunity to meet with Cheryl Lombard from Valley Partnership and a couple of our current industrial, I'm going to say suppliers, if you will, landowners and developers. Sharing the concern about the significant increase in these.
I think she sent some of us emails. I got an email.
Yeah, she sent a letter, I think over the weekend, and you know, for me, it was more important to hear from the local vendors, if you will, the local users of these, than it was Valley Partnership necessarily, because these are the folks that are currently selling land, that are currently developing land, and that was, and they expressed deep concern about the cost increase and their ability to remain competitive, particularly along the 303 corridor, as City of Glendale is starting to market pretty aggressively their area at 303 and the Northern Parkway, as well as even surprises a little bit farther, but they were more concerned about Glendale and El Mirage, because that's not too far from there either. And we've kind of ridden a lot on our ability to bring in these employers and the capital investment that they're making to drive our daytime population, which will then drive the retail and all the rest of the things that we want. So we've done a really good job of balancing that, and now they're concerned that we're going to price ourselves out of the market. So I'm still very concerned about that, and as Lori and Doug expressed during that meeting, that, geez, we're kind of at the 11th hour and maybe even 11:30. For us to go back and change now is really kind of almost impossible, which I expressed during that meeting my concern that we're being brought an issue that we basically have no judgment on. It's either do it now or do the whole thing all over again. So I was concerned about that. But Doug and Lori suggested that there's an opportunity for us to market this with an incentive package that goes with it. So I'm not going to give the speech, so I guess I'm going to look to staff to say, tell me about that. Tell us all about that simultaneously, and how do we overcome that? Because I think it's important for us, if we're going to do this, that we come right out during this meeting, during the meeting next week, during the time that these are published, that we're going to talk about our ability to incentivize those businesses.
I just want to add to that, as long as he has it. So I read somewhere about they wish we had something like Glendale has. So just throw that out to you.
Yeah, I do not know specifically what Glendale's doing, but We've had some conversations with our new economic development director, and I'll refer to Julie to talk a little bit about how she has some of her thoughts and ideas.
Good.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So when we talk about economic development incentives, there's a lot of different ways that they can be accomplished. For example, currently Goodyear has a retail incentive that we passed that was across the board that hasn't perhaps accomplished what we were hoping for. So one of the things that in talking to not only our new economic development director, but also the staff who've been here for a while, is that they feel that if we had perhaps a dedicated source of revenue, Avondale has $2 million set aside out of their general fund every year, that then can be used on a deal-by-deal basis to work with locates as they come into the community. They really cautioned against doing a one-size-fits-all type program. And what's really interesting about the industrial impact fees is when you look at an area like a Tolleson, people aren't making their locate decisions on this issue alone. It really is a whole host of issues that come together that cause them to choose the location that they choose. So truly, I think that one of the options would be to pursue a specific set aside for economic development in future upcoming budgets that then can be used so that when companies are looking to locate to our community, they know that we have dedicated resources for that purpose in particular, but it also allows the flexibility for us to put the best deal together to attract those organizations.
Two of the ones that we're
Can I
looking,
follow up, Mayor?
You know, that we would like, I gather, what you're saying. Okay.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Follow up on that. So that was essentially what Doug and Lori had talked about. And one of the things that we had in that, I hate to call them one-on-one, but the small group meeting was perhaps not using ongoing revenues for that we use one-time monies to fund that. I would hate for us to put a further stranglehold on our day-to-day operations when we've got a pretty robust source of one-time monies. And for me, that was, if we're able to do that and we're able to package that and talk about that next week, and then these become effective in April.
Yes, the fees, assuming that we get adopted on next week, we will then go through the fee adoption process, which under the current calendar would make the fees effective April 1st.
So I think for next week, I'd like to know, do we have monies available for that? I don't want to send a bad message that we're going to do these fees and then we're going to talk about it later. I'd like us to have a whole package from my perspective, like to have a whole package available for us to really market this thing appropriately, because I hate the idea that we've doubled our fees in an area that we've been very successful in attracting businesses to. Thank you.
Welcome. Joe?
A couple things to follow up on what Bill was mentioning about. First, in the presentation, it's my understanding part of the reason for the doubling was some, standards that we're using in prior that created a problem and which weren't really accurate. And as a result, you're using market conditions that drove this. Now, my biggest fear going back and changing anything is if you're tweaking it just for the sake of tweaking it, then you're back in the same position you were the original time, and you're just pushing down the road a bigger problem. So to me, I was satisfully explained that it can be defended and it is what it is. Now, to get to Bill's point, we have that $2 million that was set aside on that retail, and I don't think, but very little of it has been touched, correct?
1.9 million remains right now.
1.9, okay. There's your starting point for your $2 million. And I'll be willing to bet you when we get into the budget, there's a significant amount of money if you want to boost it up to maybe 2.5 or whatever the case may be. But I don't see that as a problem with setting that aside. I really don't. Once that's set aside, and again, to get to the point earlier, then you have some flexibility when the deals or the incentives. And once the marketing arm and the economic arm gets together and promotes that, and they know that out there, then they know there's money there to offset these costs. So to me, that's the way to go instead of trying to miss and pigeonhole something just to get it down that's really not defendable. Let's do what we have that's defendable and figure out a way to augment those additional costs. I like that approach.
The word you're using, defendable. They would not be defendable to make that change this time. I think it was Sherry first.
I want to echo what Bill said, because that's what we talked about in the meeting. You probably talked about it to everybody. I think that's the way to go forward. When we look at the list that we're doubling fees, it does seem a little high. But then when we put it in context with what the chart, that last chart you showed, that we are actually, still on the lower end. We have to, this is not just a one-year fee, this is a multi-year fee, and we're trying to project the growth. And I think what Joe pointed out was true, that our first fees were based on, I don't want to say wrong information, but probably we lowballed the information. But it can be a shock to the developers. And I understand that when they're kind of planning future out. So I think it's a great idea. Let's have some sort of fund, not across the board fund. I totally agree with our city manager. I think that's the way of more of a select fund that we can use and really market those areas that we want to grow with what we want to grow, and really as an enhancement to bring people in. I think that it does follow what Glendale does. And although the fees say one thing, if we can use those funds to kind of buy them down, and so it doesn't put our development community in shock, which I think when you saw those numbers, it's just a shock. But then when you look at it in context, you're like, well, we're looking at, Avondale, and these are their last year's fees because we're the first ones on. So I assume they're going to go up a little bit. So I think that's a great way to prevent the shock and to keep the development going. And we can work as partners with our development community by that fund. And I'm all for it. And it sounds like we've already got a start on where the money can come from. And so that sounds like a great plan.
Brandon?
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing the same thing. I was also concerned with the retail, the industrial size, especially the doubling of it. But I think we've, talked about how we could incentivize that, which is a good thing. How we do it, how we get it sustainable, so it's always there, would be a good thing to look into as well. How we're going to fund that. But yeah, I just thank the development community for expressing their concerns. I think thank staff as well for working with them, and also with just coming to a consensus. And like the chart was saying, that Sherry was saying as well, looks like we're in the ballpark of some of the other cities that we're competing with, and we have a lot of infrastructure to put in compared to some of those other cities. So there's a lot there to do. And I think one of my concerns, just bringing up, I guess the public wise, was just if for like a new business retailer, mom and pop, that's not a chain to come in. That was my concern as well, is how much of an increase. And staff let me know that it's a graduated type of scale. It's not going to be double for the mom and pop guy want to start a coffee shop in the neighborhood. It's not a huge amount. It's graduated, I guess. It changes. So that was one of my concerns as well, just because I want to incentivize I want to make sure that our entrepreneurs and the innovation hub and everybody is still growing that way. So that's one of my concerns as well. So, but yeah, I think to come to a good thing, and having the incentivized program as well should help us be able to still market. So that's what I had. Thank you.
Molly?
Well, we have the ability to do development agreements with whomever comes to Goodyear, and we can make it work somehow, I'm sure. We put our pedal to the metal, or feet to the pedal, or whatever we do. And in just looking at this comparison chart, we are so under some of the other cities, yet that whole PB3 is not built. So,
if I may add to your statement, can I just add to your statement? I don't think some of them have the quality of some of the sites that we have.
Coming out to say, we have the ability to offer so much more than some of the other cities. We have a foreign trade zone. We have a lot of things. We have water. That's a big deal. And so I really feel I appreciate hearing from Valley leadership and the folks that met with us 6 months ago, maybe. It's been a long time. And I appreciate them coming to tell us what they think. And I hope we let them know we're willing to work with them to do whatever we can do to move our city forward. And we're open to Bill's suggestion, and I'm open also to Joe's suggestion. Well, really, I think it's to find out we have money left. That's a plus right there. So that's it, Mayor.
Well, I just want to make sure that it works for our city. I don't want to end up about some cities and some pretty big cities and the condition they're in right now, and they're in trouble. They don't have the money for budget. So they may lower the price here and lower to this thing here, but they don't have the money to run their city and to keep it the quality it is. And so whatever we do, I want us to bring us all together. And I'm with you. I love development. But we cannot have all of our citizens paying for everything. Just can't do that. So we have to think about our quality of life here and making sure they have the resources they definitely need to continue to live here. And then treat certainly our businesses and our industrial and all of them fairly. And that's, I think, what we've been thinking at and going toward is fair. So, Laura?
Oh, I just wanted to add just a couple of comments. This certainly has been quite a learning process for me, and understanding that the fees that we have currently were developed in 2013, and so the world has changed significantly since then, and appreciating that it is quite a delicate balance between growing and paying for growth, and yet being a viable community, and seeing that the emphasis on the impact fees are very much in public safety, which is something that's very important to our community, as reflected in all of our studies and things like that. I just echoing everybody else, I do like the flexibility of the fund to be able to put together deals that packages that meet our needs as well as whoever's coming in. And Goodyear is open for business, and we want to be creative and flexible and remain very attractive.
Bill?
So I really appreciate the amount of effort that staff put in to meet with the development community, not just on the industrial side, but also on the residential side. I think that was something we all had asked for, but in retrospect, now looking at the amount of effort that was, I really appreciate that and the effort that everybody put forward. To use Julie's terms, as we debrief through this, hopefully a huge lesson learned is talking about, let's not throw the kitchen sink in and then decide we're going to pull it out later, that we don't come in with the giant, because I think we saw an effect on the residential growth and some of the industrial growth by the discussions that we had. So a couple of really important lessons learned for all of us. And I think we've got a different staff mentality and a different piece going forward. So when we do this again in 4 years or 5 years, hopefully most everybody is still sitting in this room, and we can take the lessons learned and do it again. But I appreciate all the hard work.
Well, had we not started with that process, which was disturbing, we wouldn't have ended up where we are. So I think it's a lesson. I think that's the lesson. It's a lesson to us, what it takes to finally come to terms with the figures and what we want to give. And I think that's what, and you're right. I always praise the staff. You guys are excellent. And that in itself should grow trust in the industrial side as well as residential, because we are right up front about everything, and it is discussed. And maybe people aren't always the happiest they want to be, or, cheering us on some of it, but we do what we have to do as a body, again, to protect the city. That's who we work for, is our citizens. And so I think we do that and try to, at the same time, be understanding and want to create more industry, or the industry that we want to see come to Goodyear. So good job.
Wonderful, thank you. And yes, we have a number of lessons learned and appreciate your feedback. And it has been a big effort for our staff and everybody. I'll pass your words on to anybody who's not here to do that, so they know that you've expressed your appreciation.
All right, is there anything left to say? then I think we're just going to go on, right, to the information. Does council member have a report on any current events? No, I guess not. Manager, do you have any summary you would like to give?
I do. I just wanted to share a little bit of information from our Shred-a-thon that we had this weekend. Get my notes. So on Saturday, October 13th, the Goodyear Police Department hosted our second Shred-a-thon event for the benefit of Goodyear residents. The event lasted from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., and they had an initial influx of approximately 100 vehicles within the first hour, and then a slower but steady stream of vehicles thereafter. They served a total of 258 vehicles, which translates to a total of 8,120 pounds, which is over 4 tons, of paper shredded. This is the environmental equivalent of saving 69 trees, over 28,000 gallons of water, 16,000 plus kilowatts of energy, keeping 244 pounds of pollutants from the atmosphere, and saving 20 cubic yards of waste from the landfill. Each vehicle received an educational bookmarker containing information about preventing identity theft and fraud. And despite the wet weather, our intrepid group of explorers and volunteers stayed through the entire event and delivered excellent service to all who attended. I also wanted to note that our annual Fall Festival is this Saturday, October 20th, from 5 to 9 p.m. at the Goodyear Ballpark. Family-friendly event includes trick-or-treating, a pumpkin patch, inflatables, arts and crafts vendors, performances, demonstrations, and more. Admission and parking at the event are free.
Molly, go ahead, Molly.
I do want to tell you, I was at Walmart after the rain stopped, and I was stopped by 2 residents, and each of them had gone through the Shred-a-thon, and they thanked me for doing it. And I said, it's the city, it wasn't me, but they really appreciated it. And I have boxes in my car that I was just too lazy to get out in the rain. I'll get it next time. And I'd like to invite all of you to the Friends of the Library book sale, which will be held during the GAIN event. At the ballpark, and we'll be on the third baseline, and the youth commissioners are going to help us. Thanks.
Nice. Any other comments? All right, then I'm going to adjourn this meeting. We're going directly into the executive session. This meeting is adjourned.